Story 1. Foreign Music. Welcome to this special episode. Thank you to all my guests for joining me. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Let's Read Mortis Media Unit 522J. Nightmares the Darkest Hour Vedith 22 Danny Dreadful Dodged the Grave Papa Scarebooze and Booze Derek Weber Scary Stories Demon Creep and Night Terrors. I hope you're ready for this. This happened about a month and a half ago. It's not a ghost story or anything, but hear me out. I heard my doorbell ring in the middle of the night. I woke up startled. Checking the time, it was around 3:30 and pitch black in my apartment. My apartment is a pretty small studio apartment. I wondered what the hell was going on, so I got up without turning on the lights. Slowly approached the door and put my eye to the people. Worried. What I saw when I looked through the people was a man, I presumed to be in his 40s. I'm a male, I live alone, and this guy was older than me and a complete stranger. He stood there facing my door and he was wearing a suit. We sometimes get these people checking if we have TV licenses or doing door-to-door sales, but never this late. There was something wrong here. Yes, I called out. I didn't want to open the door without knowing why he was in front of my door at 3:30. I watched, and he seemed to either not hear me or was in some sort of trance-like state, because he didn't move or react in the slightest. And I started to feel creeped out. My mind was attempting to create logic and piece together reasons for this late-night visit, but it was grasping at straws. There was no good reason why he was here, let alone saying nothing. I slowly backed away from the door into the darkness of my apartment. I jumped out of my skin when I heard the doorbell ring again. I grabbed my phone and called the police from my bedroom. I told him that there was a stranger at the door, and the police come quickly. I backed myself as far away as I could from my door and just listened in silence. It was quiet out there. My bell hadn't rung again since the time I called the police, about 10 minutes or so, and I heard a knock at the door and a voice announced that they were the police. I checked through the people and I saw two officers out there. One officer took my statement and the other was knocking on my neighbor across the hall's door. I thought to myself, why are they doing that? I must admit I did kind of feel relieved to see someone I knew. I was still shaken up, but I think he looked more relieved than I did. My neighbor across the hall is a 20-year-old office worker like me. He said that he heard my doorbell and it woke him up. In our building you can pretty much hear when anyone's doorbell rings. It's a pretty old building. He told the police that he heard my voice while lying in bed and he got up to see what was happening out to you. When he heard my doorbell for the second time, he did what I did and approached the people with the lights off and saw the person who was out there. He said that he thought the man was hiding some kind of object of his coat sleeve. I tried to think what it could have been. A weapon, maybe. This strange man put his eye to my people several times in what I can only assume was an attempt to look inside my apartment. My neighbor watched him do this for a while, and then suddenly the man in the hallway turned to face his door. He said it felt like he'd been spotted. He was so creeped out by that he called the police, and I'm grateful he did. He probably helped bump this incident of their priority list. Like I said at the start, this happened a month and a half ago. My neighbor pretty much instantly moved out of our building. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to do that. I am still living here. Thankfully nothing else has happened, yet I don't think he purposely selected me that night. I just think he was out there trying apartments to see if he could get into any. He was just a weirdo passing by. What really frightened me about the incident, though, was the silence. There was no attempt to persuade me to open the door, no lies to convince me. It was just cold, harsh quietness. Perhaps he was attempting to play on my curiosity or sense of decency, or maybe he just didn't want to make any noise out there where the neighbors could have heard. You can tell that I've been thinking about this a lot. I hope I never see him again. I don't want my questions answered. I believe that his intentions were sinister. Music. Story 2 read by Let's Read. I didn't know much about living in the wilderness when I bought a house with my best friend, but it was a really good deal that we just couldn't pass up. My friend Julia and I were going to school about a half an hour away, and buying a house for the next 4 years actually turned out to be cheaper than the rent would have been at the end of it all. Plus, this meant no landlords, and we could do whatever we wanted with the place. The house was technically considered off-grid since it wasn't connected to our city's power grid, which of course helped us with the price. Thankfully, the previous owners agreed to sell us their solar panels as part of the overall price, which was actually super lucky. The house was also on septic, and we had Well, so even though it was off-grid, we still had all the luxuries of living in a house in the city. Julie and I both had pretty well-paying jobs, and I'm not ashamed to say that we both come from families who helped us with a mortgage from time to time. Anyways, the number one rule that I made with Julie when we agreed to buy this house together was that we wouldn't give our address to anyone but family, no friends, no boyfriends, and especially no random guys. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't want to risk the wrong person knowing that we two 22-year-old women were living 30 minutes outside of town, miles from the next house. It just didn't seem smart to me. Julie always said that she was fine with the rule, and for the first year we lived together and she respected it. At least I think she did. Then one day in our second year of being housemates, I came home to her making out with some random guy on the sofa in the living room. I was livid. I screamed at the guy to get out, which of course only made Julie mad, but I really didn't care. I had boundaries in my reason for not wanting men over to the house seemed pretty fair. After he left, she yelled at me that I was being stupid and having a guy over from time to time wasn't going to do anything bad. I tried telling her that it just wasn't smart letting people we don't even know into our house and letting it be known that we live alone with basically no means to protect ourselves, but she still didn't get it. She just kept saying, "This isn't the movie. Taking a guy isn't going to come back and kidnap and sell us." Calm down, live a little. Their making fun of the situation made me feel like I had made a huge mistake buying this house with the person I thought I knew so well. She'd been my best friend for 4 years, and I never got the impression that she would be so careless. I called my mom that night and told her what happened. She agreed with me that it was dumb of Julie to invite a guy over that she didn't even know. I also told her that it made me uncomfortable staying there knowing this guy knew where we lived, who we were, and that we lived alone. I mean, it was obvious no guy lived with us. Every picture in the place was just two of us, and I'm pretty sure Julie probably told him that she only had one roommate. It wouldn't have been a shocker if she did. She brought him back to the house after. Also, telling him about her life wouldn't have been a big deal. My mom told me that if I was uncomfortable that I could just stay with her for a few nights, and if I wanted to go back after then I could, and if not I could stay however long I needed. I appreciated the offer and decided that I go to school the next day, go home, pack some things, and then head off to my mom's for a bit. Julie thought that I was being dramatic, but I didn't care. I went to school the next day as planned and made my way back to the house. That afternoon I decided to wait until Julie got home to let her know how long I'd be gone, and just to make sure that she locked up. Clearly she wasn't the most responsible person, so I couldn't rely on her to secure the place. After I left at around 8 p.m., I decided I was done waiting and began making my way to the front door with my bag in hand. When I reached the hall that led into the living room, I stopped in my tracks. Thankfully, the darkness that filled the house hid me as I watched two men in black masks standing at the door behind the frosted glass. They were talking to each other when I heard one of them say, "I'm telling you, man, the girls who live here are all types of fine. Now get the door open before they hear you." My heart sank, and I didn't know what to do. I just had to hide. I guess now I realize that I probably should have slipped out the back door, but I really wasn't thinking. Instead, I slowly walked back into my room, shut and locked the door, and started trying to find some places to hide. I watched a movie the previous night that gave me the idea of opening my window to make it look as though I'd gone out that way, so I did that and climbed into the back of my closet and hid under a couple of thick comforters I'd shoved back there after last winter. I heard the sound of the glass on the front door shattering, and I felt tears beginning to streak down my face. I wasn't going to be one of those girls you see in movies and TV shows who can't keep quiet, though. I was barely breathing, so I wouldn't make a sound. I listened as they made their way through the house, loudly arguing with each other that they hadn't found this yet. I silenced my phone so I wouldn't give up my hiding spot if it were to go off. And I texted Julie not to come home. The people had broken into her house, and to call 911 immediately. I also texted my mom and told her what was happening, and for her to call 911 too. Of course, they both started blowing on my phone, but when I heard the men try the handle to my bedroom door, I couldn't focus on anything but staying hidden and staying quiet. "She's gotta be in here, her car's out front. I'm gonna be so pissed if she's not, and you had me break into this house for nothing." They argued back and forth like that for a couple of minutes until one of them must have gotten tired of it and kicked the door in. I was relieved when the window trick seemed to work, and they screamed at each other that I got in the way. The relief only lasts in a minute, though. When one of them told the other to look around for anything they could take that might have been worth something. I started praying that they wouldn't look too far into my closet, that they wouldn't pull back the comforters I was under and do what men do to women whose houses they break into. I heard one of the men leave my room, but I could tell one of them stayed. I heard him begin to go through my drawers and throw things across the room. You seem frustrated, which was probably due to the fact that I don't own super nice things, no expensive jewelry, nothing designer. I could never justify spending that kind of money, and clearly this guy didn't appreciate that my breath stopped in my throat when I heard his footsteps get closer to the closet doors. I didn't move an inch. There was no way that I was going to give this guy any reason to believe I was in there. It felt like I was going to have a heart attack when he opened the closet doors. I could feel the vibrations of him moving things around off the shelves overhead, and just when I felt him grab hold of the blankets I was under, his friend burst into the room yelling that they had to go. Apparently they heard sirens down the road and got scared. They ran out of the house, and I stayed in my spot. I had every intention of staying there all night. I was terrified of the possibility that they were still there, and that was until I heard my mom's voice calling for me from inside the house. I tore the comforters off my body, and as quickly as I could I ran toward my mom's voice. The second I saw her, I burst into tears. All the emotion I'd held in that whole time was being let out, and I couldn't control it. I wish I could tell you that they found the men who broke in, but they didn't. They left behind no evidence, and the police didn't find anyone in the woods surrounding the house. The guy Julie brought over the previous night had a solid alibi too, so they ruled him out. He also denied telling anyone where we live, but I don't buy it. I moved out the next day. It took a while, but Julie eventually agreed to take my name off the mortgage. Of our other friends moved in with her, and I moved back in with my parents. I feel safer with them. I just wish they'd caught the guys who terrorized me that night. Story 3. Lately I've been hearing a voice outside my window late at night. I can only make out a few words. It mutters, "Give it back." Then she calls out a name and asks for this person to give whatever it is back. The voice is definitely female, and it's loud enough to wake me up if I have my window open. I can usually hear this voice between 1 and 3 a.m. and between 1 and 4 times a week. Sometimes it's really loud, and other times it's as loud as the usual street noise. Unless I'm in a deep sleep, I will wake up when I hear it. After about 2 weeks, I feel sleep deprived and not my usual self. The window is close to my bed, and whenever I heard the noise, I looked out thereafter, but I couldn't ever see anyone. I thought that I could have been hearing things. I even thought that I could have been having bad dreams. But one night, I heard something else react to the voice. There's a pretty crazy dude in my neighborhood. He lives diagonally across from my place, and I heard him shout out a few times for whoever it was to shut up. A few nights later, I was out with a good friend of mine drinking and heading home pretty drunk. I live just off the main street and down an alleyway to get to my place. You have to follow the curve of the alleyway, and then you come out in my little neighborhood. As soon as I came out of the alleyway, I saw a woman loitering by my house. She was holding a box under her arm. It was about the size of A5 or A4 paper. I could see papers all bundled up in there. It was her voice that I'd been hearing. She was muttering right in front of my window for someone to give something back to her. I was freaked out by her. That, coupled with being sleep deprived, created a weird cocktail of fear. She wasn't facing me, and I wasn't sure if she realized I was there or not. I used this opportunity to quietly call the police. I hoped that this would be the end of me getting woken up at night so often. 2 officers arrived pretty quickly, and they took away the woman, who went kicking and screaming. She sounded possessed. I got a little scared. I mean, I'm a single woman living alone, and I didn't want this crazy person to know that I was the one who called the police. That when the officers took my statement, I said to them I wanted my details to remain anonymous, and for any information they had to retain on me to be kept private. The officer called later to say that the woman was being kept in custody and for me not to worry. Now here's the scary part of this experience. It was about 2 a.m. when I got a call from the officer. About 5 minutes later, I heard something outside, and a female voice was muttering, "Can't fit back." Then she called out a name and asked for this person to give whatever it is back. Instantly, I was really frightened, but then I thought that I was hearing things. You know, auditory hallucinations. But when I heard the voice coming from the other side of my front door for the first time, I knew it was real, and I stood there frightened and unable to move. Then the banging started. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone. I called the officer who had just called me and told me not to worry. I frantically told him that there was someone at the door trying to get in. He came back to search for the would-be intruder and said that he couldn't find anyone in the area. He told me to keep all my doors shut and locked and to try to calm down. It was pretty hysterical at this point. He said he would be back later to patrol the area just in case. Then about 10 minutes after he left, I heard that dreadful voice from outside, calling for someone to give something back to her. She was so much louder this time. I didn't want to call the cops again in fear that this could all be in my hand. I didn't want to seem crazy. I didn't think I was. It all seemed very real to me. I didn't want to keep filling out reports all night confident that the doors were locked and I was safe. I got into bed and tried to ignore the shrill cries of the woman outside. In the morning, I contacted the police and asked about how long the woman would remain in custody just in case they let her out. They said that since she really didn't settle down until 5 a.m. and because she was being violent, she stayed in the cells that night and she'd be checked later today. So in other words, the person who came to my door definitely wasn't the person they arrested. Now that I think about it, the voices were similar but not identical. They had the same kind of raspy, stale, stilted manner and quality to their voice. Though I had a meeting at work that morning I had to go to, but I was scared to leave. I pulled myself together and timidly headed out the front door. There were loads of dirty footprints all over the bottom half of my door. I had looked as if it had been repeatedly kept. I guess that was the banging sound. I took some photos and I had it off. When the police came in the evening, I showed them the door and my photos once again. When night came, I heard the voice of a woman out there calling for someone to give something back to her. The police told me that they thought there was a group of these suspicious people in the area. They weren't able to provide me with a reason or motive for their actions. That was it for me. I stayed with a friend the following night. The police were watching us that night. They patrolled both outside my home and my friend's home. They didn't find anyone that night, though after the night I stayed with my friend. The police patrols continued, but I never heard that voice again. Something weird did happen. About 3 days later, I got a call on my home phone and I heard a voice muttering something unintelligible. It was strange. I don't put my number in the phone book. I usually don't answer calls from withheld numbers, anonymous numbers, and that kind of thing, but my niece was staying over that night and she picked up the phone. When she answered the phone, she said that she heard nothing but silence, and that was when she handed it to me. As soon as I said hello, her voice started muttering something angrily to me. I'm kind of glad I didn't understand or hear what the voice said. I don't need to know what kind of curse or threats were attempted to be smacked down the phone at me, because whenever I think about the voice I heard outside there banging at the door and the idea that there might be more of these cult-like people who were seemingly intent on harassing me, and I get scared. I have racked my brain and I cannot think of a person, male or female, that I've fallen out with, been in a relationship with, or irritated who could be capable of doing this. I'm glad it's all over with. I consider it all over with since I haven't had another incident for a while. If anything else happens, I will let you know. Music. Story 4 read by Mortis Media. I'm a female, and back when I was 18-19 years old, I was house sitting with a girl I was studying with. A family we were house sitting for went to the same church as her, but I didn't really know them that well myself. It was more to keep her company in a huge house. This was 1997, when the average teen like me did not own a cell phone. During the week, though we were house sitting, it was a short break in the school calendar, which is why this family was away and why the streets in the area were quieter than usual. My apartment, as well as the house we sat for, was not far from the university. My apartment was actually a 3-minute walk from it, and the house a further 5 minutes by car, so being a student neighborhood, it was particularly quiet this week. The first weird thing that happened the week I was at this house was that I dreamed I was driving through a dark forest on a windy, hilly dirt road with no lights anywhere except for those from my car's headlights. As I started to go down a hill, the headlights suddenly cut out and everything went dark. The car slowed down to a stop and died. I awoke in the morning. I went out to my car and it wouldn't start. It had been working perfectly fine the day before, and I had to call a guy to come fix it. It was the starter motor. Well, that was the first creepy thing that happened that week. A day or two later, it was Friday. I planned on driving back home to my parents, who lived in a smaller town about 45 minutes away. I packed up my stuff at the big house and was going to head over to my apartment to collect whatever else I Needed for the weekend, a trip between the house and the apartment was, as I mentioned, only 5 minutes or so away. Since it was winter, it was dark by the time I left at 7. As I was driving from the house, I noticed in my rearview mirror the headlights of the car behind me tailing. Very close when I turned back, then I was cautious but not overly. So cautious enough to notice in such a short distance that something strange was going on behind me, but then when I pulled up to a traffic light, it wasn't there anymore. And I was struck with relief, however, it was short-lived, the car was. Now beside me, I looked to my right, and there was a man inside alone, smiling at me slightly maniacally. For a moment, I thought, geez, I should drive with a beanie at night so people don't think I'm a petite 5'2" female with long blonde hair down to my waist, which is what I am. I also thought, well, he's in the lane to turn right, so I'm good. He pulled off and the headlights were behind me again, so close I could barely see them over the back of my car. What an ass, I thought, who drives like that? Thank goodness my turn is coming up on the left soon. After another minute or two of this tailgating, I slowed down strategically, didn't indicate, and made a sudden sharp left into my driveway, opened the automatic gates, and shot inside. The gates closed behind me, and the drama was over. I gathered a few things from the car to take up with me. I noticed on my way over to the stairwell that there was a man at the gate just behind me. He was still on the other side, and I was at the far end of the parking lot, but I could make out it was the dude from the tailgating car. He was jumping up and down, shaking the gate with absolute rage, while I was safely on this side, so I wasn't completely gripped with fear. And besides, there was a group of students making a noise nearby, arriving for a party or something. I headed to the stairs and started going for the basement and ground level to the first floor, rounding the stairs on the first floor when I noticed someone running across the parking lot towards the staircase. In hindsight, I still can't fathom why I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I guess it's because I subconsciously knew that there was the group being let in through the pedestrian gate. As I was rounding the staircase between the second and third floor, someone suddenly touched me, spun around. It was the guy. He had slipped in as part of the small crowd. He said something. I said something sassy back and told him to F off. Then I turned my back on him to continue up the stairs. I lived on the third and final floor. He grabbed me from behind, helped my back against his chest with his arm around my neck, and I felt something being held against my right side. Oh crap. It was a knife. He led me down, and I remember thinking that the light was broken on the bottom level and that this couldn't end well, but I was calm. I resisted slightly, but he tightened his grip. I felt like I wasn't getting enough oxygen and started to become a dead weight. He started to drop me. I was at groin level. I elbowed and it connected. He dropped me but spun around to face me, ripped the front of my buttons down top. And then he stopped. He looked at someone behind me, someone taller than him, and his eyes went wide. He turned around and ran. I screamed. Then I too turned around to see who had come to help, but no one was there. People came out of their apartments. After that the police were called, and this was the second time they were called there that night. Turns out other weird things have happened that my dad had already called the police about, and they had come past an hour before. As it turned out, they caught the guy, identified him in a lineup. He committed sexual assault serially and was accused of doing it to 14 women. One had thrown herself out of the first floor of her apartment to get away from him and broken her leg. Later the police called me before his trial. His cell door had been left open. He was gone. Apparently it was an inside job. This happened in the early 2000s, and I was probably in first grade. This story takes place in Bulgaria. I am from a mid-sized town, not too small and not too big, the perfect one for raising your children. Crime is pretty much unheard of. You can sleep outside on a bench and nothing would happen to you. One weekend, some family friends from a nearby town came to my town to visit, and my parents and I decided to go to the park with them. Now, it's important to say that all of the parks in my town are located right on the edge of town, so they are actually parks and forests. At some point the park we went to became a forest. Since it's not a very big town, we don't have central parks. In the park we went to, it runs along a river, so it's a very narrow alley, but a very long one, and on one side is the river, on the other there is a thick forest and cliffs. At that time, I didn't like the park so much because it was a very long walk to get to the end of it, so like most kids I got bored of walking with my parents and the other family since they were talking grown-up stuff and I really didn't want to listen to them. I decided to run off ahead, and by ahead I mean out of sight from my parents. Keep in mind that this is a one-alley park which mostly goes straight forward, with slight curves due to the river, so I'd gone pretty far. Usually in this park there are always people around and it's quite crowded on the weekends, but since it was summer most people were on family vacations. And it was surprisingly empty. I couldn't see anyone in a straight line either way. At that point, I started hearing something in the forest, which was pretty loud since on the other side was the river and it was pretty loud by itself. I stopped and started to stare into the forest. I saw how the bushes were moving and something was coming in my direction. I was still pretty clueless to what was happening until I saw a man with long hair have band across his forehead, dressed like a hunter with an air rifle on his back, running full speed towards me. There was no freezing moment. I just started running in the opposite direction and screaming my lungs out for my parents, hoping that they could hear me, but because of the river, I doubt that anyone could have heard me from 100 meters away. I remember looking back and seeing him still chasing me. I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is the end. And it's over. I started to imagine how he would catch me and drag me into the forest, and how I would never see my family and friends again. It felt like an eternity, but I finally saw my parents and our family friends. My whole face was red. I was crying and snotting like crazy, barely breathing. The hunter also stopped running after he saw my parents and the others. I remember my parents started screaming at him, asking him what he thought he was doing. I was just relieved that it was over, but I remember him shaking his head like he was saying, I did nothing wrong, I was only trying to help him. The weirdest part was that there is no game in that park. It's a park after all. And the force that he was hiding in is max 50 meters in width before the cliffs begin, so it was impossible to have any game there since there are always people walking around. You can see wild foxes, but that's about it. You need to go beyond the park out in the forest to hunt game. It's also highly illegal to carry a firearm out in public. Only police and military personnel are allowed to carry firearms. I don't know anyone who owns a car. Civilians are only allowed to register for airguns for hunting. No hardcore weapons allowed, and of course you're not allowed to carry them in the park where there are people. They're only permitted in regulated zones for hunting game away from populated areas. You would never see hunters like that unless you go to these zones, or if you're in a village, which is still rare. No, we didn't report it afterwards. Too much of a hassle. This was the first and last time something like that has happened to me ever. And I haven't developed fear from that place. Even now when I go back to my town, I go running in the park after midnight and I am perfectly fine. Story 6, read by The Darkest Hour. This is one of my favorite personal stories since everything turned out all right. But I still get chills thinking about how many different ways the night could have gone wrong. A few years ago, my friend Jane and I took a trip to Portland, Oregon. We're both from the south side of Chicago, and Jane was feeling pretty jaded with the city. She was convinced everything was better on the West Coast, including the people, so we flew out to Portland and rented a car which we named Veronica. The day before we were supposed to fly back home, we took Veronica for a drive up to Aberdeen, Washington to see Kurt Cobain's childhood home. After that, we drove down the coast, sightseeing along the way. We visited Astoria, Oregon to see the house from the Goonies, and ended the day at Cannon Beach to check out Haystack Rock. All in all, it was a pretty nice day. Once it started to get dark, we decided to head back to our hotel, which is just under 2 hours away. I knew that I needed gas, so I told Jane to stop at the first gas station we see. Cannon Beach is a small resort-type town, a lot of little shops and restaurants, but I didn't see any gas stations. Being from the city, I'm used to seeing two on every corner, so I wasn't really worried. I expected to find one soon. I'm completely unfamiliar with the area, so I keep following the GPS's instructions while talking to Jane. Next thing I know, I'm not in any type of town or on a dark winding road surrounded by trees. At this point, I'm getting a little worried. I pull over to the side of the road to use the GPS to search for the nearest gas station. It tells me there's one about a mile down the road. Awesome, I'll get some gas and we'll be set. So I'm driving in the car. Veronica tells us that we've arrived at our destination. I pull into a completely dark and empty gas station. We're still surrounded by woods and darkness as far as I can tell. There's nothing around for miles. According to Veronica, we have about 10 miles worth of gas in the nearest gas station 30 miles away. Jane and I are sitting there trying to figure out what to do when another car pulls in. I keep going on about my business. I don't really pay attention to the other Car, I just assume that they need gas too. Out of the corner of my eye I see someone gesturing to me. After some hesitation, I cracked the window to see what they want. There's a middle-aged man and his wife. In the car, he starts asking us all kinds of questions. Need to fill up. Coming from the beach driving back to Portland, I keep my answers polite but short. Then he tells us that he actually owns the gas station we're at, but doesn't make enough money to keep it open that late. He tells us that he knows of a Chevron about 3 miles away and gives us directions for it. He gave us his number and says to give him a call in case we don't make it to Chevron. My name is Sam the mechanic. Let me know if you don't make it and I'll come rescue you. Ladies, we thank him profusely and head out. Jane's going on and on about how nice that was and how that would have never happened in Chicago. I agreed that was very nice, if odd of him. Strange that he happened to be driving past his gas station at the same time we pulled in, but whatever. I make a joke about him calling his buddy at the gas station saying, I'm sending 2 women your way. We make it to the Chevron and this kid 18 or 19 years old comes out to pump our gas. He asks us how we're doing and then says there's a lot of weirdos out tonight. Jane and I look at each other and let out a small laugh and say, I told you. I turn back to the kid and I asked him what he means. He tells me this story about how his brother owes some drug dealer a ton of money and now he's hiding somewhere nearby. He's planning on kicking the out of him once he gets off his shift. I can tell Jane is getting uncomfortable with the building and the weirdness of the night, so I give the kid a good tip, wish him luck, and start driving again. At one point during our conversation, Jane calls Sam the mechanic and leaves him a voicemail. She tells him that we made it to the gas station and how much we appreciate his help. I thought the call was unnecessary, but it is what it is. A few minutes later, we're on the highway, and we're about 10 minutes from the hotel. Jane's phone rings, and it's Sam again. She thanks him profusely. He asks her where we're from and when we're flying home. He tells her his name is Sam Glusty, and he wrote a book called Wrongfully Accused. We should read it when we're on a plane ride home. This piqued my interest. Jane, you have to look up that book to see what it's about. She Googles it, then she goes limp, and she looks like she's going to puke. What is it? I ask. He was accused of being the Green River Killer. Immediately she starts freaking out. He has my number. Now back at the hotel we do some more __. Apparently a victim of the Green River serial killer picked Sam out of a lineup. However, the real killer was caught and convicted based on DNA evidence. But around the same time in the 70s, Sam was convicted and served time for abducting and assaulting a young woman in the area that we were in. The book he wrote was about all of that. We ended up stuck in Portland for 2 more days due to a snowstorm in Chicago. It was a weird, tension-filled 2 days. Considering the circumstances and weirdness of that night, things could have gone horribly wrong. I'm glad all I got out of that night was a story. Story 7, read by The Darkest Hour. A few summers back, after I had just turned 18, a friend had invited me and some other friends to their family's second home in wine country. I was super excited, and I'd agreed to meet my friends at a semi-distant subway station, BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit. Since it was only a weekend trip, I had all of my stuff in a backpack in my sleeping bag hooked onto the backpack. I'm pretty sure that because of that, many people mistook me for a female vagrant and thus more approachable or maybe vulnerable. Indeed, that subway trip alone had more weird encounters than I've ever had before. That same trip, I got hit on by a man 3 times my age and screamed at by a homeless man who was asking for the time. However, by far the weirdest encounter that day, and probably in my life, was when the bearded woman and the open-back hospital gown and hospital bracelet approached me. Music. Now, I don't like to think of myself as discriminatory towards people with mental health issues, as most of my friends are depressed in some form or fashion. Yet, when that woman in a hospital gown in plastic hospital bracelet, when she approached me, my mind went straight to all those horror films about people escaping from an insane asylum, which turned out to not be too far from the truth. To give a bit more details on this woman, she was physically intimidating. Due to her very large and wide stature, she was at least 6 inches taller than me and weighed a good 70 pounds more, and most memorable of all, she had a large amount of sparse, patchy, and wiry facial hair. When she started to approach me, I desperately looked down at my phone and tried to pretend I was anywhere else but on that train platform, hoping that she wasn't actually headed for me. That of course did nothing, and she sat right next to me. She first asked if she could borrow my phone. I really didn't want this person to borrow my phone, is not only did I need to save the battery to rendezvous my friends, but there had recently been a string of cell phone thefts on BART. I was not about to let mine get stolen. So I gave her some excuse about my battery, hoping that she would just leave me alone. Unfortunately, my refusal was not a deterrent, as she took that as a cue to strike up a conversation. She asked if I was traveling, picking up on my large backpack and sleeping bag, and I said yes, but trying to be as vague as possible. Then she asks where I'm going, and as I did not know how to deflect her and being too deeply uncomfortable to lie, I said the truth, Napa. She then proceeds to tell me how she'd gotten locked up at a psychiatric facility in Napa after she had beat her husband with a phone receiver after he threatened her. Feeling very glad that I had not given her my phone, I try to defuse the situation by sympathizing with her over her awful ex-husband. That prolongs the conversation. She asks me again to borrow my phone so that she could show me a website called World's Best Gore Vids. Really, there's a particular video, she was a fan of it, was a graphic video of a man getting his head run over by a tank. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not something I want to watch ever, but especially not with the woman who had just admitted to savagely beating someone. Luckily, soon after my train arrives at the station, and I boarded. Unluckily, so did she. She kept talking to me during the ride. For my part, one tried to say as little as possible to not seem rude and anger her, while also trying to make it clear that I wasn't interested in talking. She didn't pick up on this cue, or didn't care. We parted ways a few stops later when she got off the train. She told me that she was meeting her new boyfriend there and she'd wanted to call him, which is why she wanted to borrow my phone. I sincerely hope that her new man does not have any phone receivers lying around. Story 8. This happened when I was 11. I have an older brother who was 16 at the time and 2 younger brothers. My parents would often go out for dinner on a Friday and leave us home with some hired Videos pizza, and my brother in charge. My brother would often leave to his friend's place down the road on the same street and then leave me in charge. I like this because I like being in charge and I got to choose the movies. This Friday night it was stormy and raining on and off. There was some lightning and thunder around. I was watching a movie and my 2 brothers were playing in the carport. It was a large open plant space you can fit 4 cars under, and because my mom and dad were out, you could skateboard, ride a bike, and do all sorts of things. Standing in our carport to the left was a park. We had no neighbors on this side, so you'd often see people using the footpath, walking their dogs, riding, running into the night, as there were some half-decent street maps darting along it. If you went out of our driveway you could go straight into the park. It was a great place to grow up. This night my brother was on the road as usual and had written his friend's number down and left us to it. I was probably into a second movie for the night when my 2 younger brothers ran in and said a man is watching them from the park near our fence. Now, normally I think they were playing a joke, but their faces had that different concerned look, so I thought I'd better come and have a look. We head back out to the carport. Standing in the doorway looking out toward the park, there's no sign of him. There's a lightning flash and it lights up enough just outside of the carport that we see the man my brother saw is now standing in our yard watching us. We all screamed and slammed the door. We ran to my mom and dad's room and locked the door. We grabbed the phone and run the cord from the bedroom to the bathroom, and we locked the door. We called my brother's friend's house. His friend answers, and I tell him there's a man in our yard. He yells out to my brother and then says they're coming up on their BMX bikes. The wait was probably not even 5 minutes till they arrived, but it felt like anxious when they left. My brother told his friend's parents and they called the police and they came up as well. We came back out of the house when they arrived, calling out to us. When they arrived, they said the man was gone. Soon after the police arrived, and then another vehicle that went up through the park. It was sort of a scary night, but the police searched our house for us and the yard and the streets and the park, and it seemed pretty reassuring at the time. And to me, my big brother was fearless and always looked out for us. Having him back was just as reassuring as having the police being there. My parents arrived home not too long after with 2 police cars at our house. And the neighbors in the driveway, my brother's friend's parents, were there as well. This was not during the time of mobile phones, so I'm thinking what they were wondering had happened as they came into our driveway probably had their hearts Racing, I don't recall hearing that the man was ever found or caught. Years later when I moved out and my younger brothers took over my room, my dad told me one night my younger brother walked my mom and dad wide as a ghost. Was their words, and he said a man was standing at his window. The man woke him up saying, "Hey boy, or your parents home?" My parents never told any of us that at the time, but the timeline fit with them. Changing the big open window fly scream with metal anti-braking bars. Music. Story 9 read by J Nightmares. There's a long and established family-run restaurant in my hometown I don't want to mention the name for fear of legal repercussions. My hometown is way out in the countryside. There aren't many businesses there. Everyone sort of knows everyone. Especially the family who runs the restaurant. Their business has been around for generations. I don't have any friends in this town, and I'm okay with that. The restaurant family has an eldest son that I sometimes spoke to, but he was a few years older than me. He went to university, and I didn't see him for a while. About 7 to 8 years ago that man damn near lost his mind, and 7 to 8 years ago was about the last time I saw him. Let me tell you what happened. It was late, but not that late. I was playing on my NES, then from nowhere I heard this kind of moaning voice. Let me try and contextualize it for you. It sounded like a kid who was nagging their parent for a toy in a store, something like a whine, but not one of pain. At first I thought it could even be the sound of a distant howling dog, but I quickly realized that it was human. It was really creepy since it was dark out and there was nothing but open fields outside my window. I didn't like it at all, so I ran downstairs to tell my mum about what I heard. She opened our back garden doors and listened intently, paced back and forth, restlessly trying to place the sound. I remember being nervous. It ended up not bothering my mum as much as it bothered me. I think she said, "Don't worry, it's just the sound of the outdoors," or something like that, so I went back upstairs to continue playing my game. But that moaning didn't cease. I hated it. It made my skin crawl, yet I was curious. Somehow I moved over to my window and looked outside in search of the source of that sound. I determined that the moaning was coming from the restaurant, not the restaurant itself, but the building behind it. The building I assumed they stored their produce in. From my window I could see a skylight over the building. I saw something moving around in there. Since it was dark, I couldn't see what was in the room beneath the skylight, but I could clearly see something that looked like it was human, and that human was making that sound. It was holding onto the window frame and shaking it as hard as they could whilst making that dreadful sound. I remember thinking it was like a human in a zoo. It was clearly trapped. I ran over and got my mother and told her to come and look. She said that she knew who that was. It was the eldest son from that restaurant family. I asked her for more details because I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. My mother told me that from what she heard around the town, his mother pressured him into university, a prestigious university, no less. The pressures of achieving his parents' expectations were too much for him to bear, since they demanded nothing short of top grades. There was a rumor around town that he had a nervous breakdown, and no one had seen him since, so it has been said that he was given a room in that warehouse. Well, perhaps a more accurate term might be confined to a room in that warehouse. The fact that their son has suffered with his mental health has embarrassed his parents, and apparently he is being hidden away to spare their blushes. Of course, these were nothing but rumors. But when I heard that moaning coming from the direction of that warehouse, I couldn't help but think that these were truthful rumors. All the while my mother was explaining this, he was rattling and wailing. He reminded me of my friend's hamster, the way it knew where the opening to the cage was but lacked the capacity to escape it. I said to my mother, "Let's go over there. It's not right what they're doing to him." My mother wanted nothing to do with it. I'm a female and I was a teenager at the time, and I didn't want to do it alone, so I told my mother that I would call the police and have them deal with it. I was told not to cause an uproar and just to ignore it. Deep down I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't listen to that poor man go on moaning like that. I knew that no one else would do anything about it either, since the only house close enough to be in earshot of the warehouse was ours. I guess that's why my mum didn't want us to be the ones who complained. I mean, if that family did that to their own son, what would they be capable of doing to their neighbors? In a sense, I was the only one who could hear him, and I didn't want to let him down. I had to find the courage to go to his family home and speak to them myself. I told my mother what I intended to do, and she didn't try to stop me. She didn't try to come with me either. I got to their house and I rang that door buzzer again, and again they had an intercom, so I knew they heard me. In fact, anything I said was audible through the intercom. Realizing this, I began to speak to them. "Excuse me, there's someone in your warehouse. I think someone might be hurt in there." There was no response. I was shaking with adrenaline and fear. I took the plunge and shouted, "Fine, I'll just call the police." As soon as I said that, I got a reply, "There's no one in there, please go away." The voice said I couldn't do much else than go home and call the police. Seconds after I left, the wails of their son stopped abruptly, and I never heard them again. Could the rumors just be rumors? Couldn't an animal have gotten in there? I don't know. I didn't know what to do. I never heard him again, and eventually time passed and I left home. He'll be 30 years old this year, according to my mother. If he's still alive, is he still out there in that big dark warehouse? I asked my mom as often as I can if she's heard any noises coming from the warehouse, but she says she hasn't. This really plays on my mind. Music. When I was in kindergarten, I was forced. Story 10 read by J. Nightmares. To swallow a thumbtack. I want to share my experience on the off chance that it might help someone out there. It's a long shot, but I figured why not. When I was a kid, I went to a kindergarten in a school called the Sakura Group. My teacher had one simple rule, and that was you cannot tell a lie. There was even a weird song about it that the teacher made us sing in the morning at school. I can't remember the words, perhaps because I wish to forget them, but to my recollection it went something like this: "If you tell a lie, you have to swallow 1,000 needles." We sang that song all the time. I never liked it. The meaning inferred was that if you break a promise or a lie, then you will be hurt just as much as the person you lied to will be hurt. It was a very old rhyme from the 1800s. When I was in kindergarten, I didn't really understand the meaning of the song, kind of like Red Riding Hood. You never feel bad for the grandma. It just happens sometimes in class. We watch the kids' TV show called Mr. Nopo. I haven't seen it since kindergarten. Anyway, the episode we watched was about him making animals out of old milk cartons. We were allowed to do the same thing the next day in class, and I was really excited, so our teacher said, "All right, every night, everyone, please bring in your milk carton tomorrow so we can make our animals. Don't forget to ask your parents when you get home. Don't forget, it's gotta be a milk carton." Everyone in the class, included myself, responded with, "Yes, miss." I got home as fast as I could, and I asked my parents for a milk carton. My mom told me that we had only just opened the milk in our refrigerator, so I couldn't use that one. She then produced an empty soy milk carton from the garbage. She said it was the same kind of thing. The next day, I proudly brought my silly milk carton to kindergarten, but I was told that my milk carton wasn't right. When you think about it, the curtains are slightly different in perhaps the paper color or the thickness. Mr. Nopo from that TV show didn't tell us on TV how to make an animal out of a soy milk carton. He told us to use a milk carton. I guess that's why the kindergarten teacher got so angry with me that day. "Hey, this isn't a milk carton." Everyone in the classroom, including you, promised to bring in a milk carton to class today, right? Why have you brought something entirely different?" she scolded. I was too young, too shy, and too nervous to respond. I just sat there shocked. She turned to her desk at the head of the class, rooted around in her desk drawer, and then stormed towards my desk with something in her hand. Turned out to be a thumbtack case. She stopped at my desk with a half smile and turned to the other children in my class and proudly declared, "Everyone, your fellow student has brought something entirely different to class. So what do we do when somebody lies? Can anybody remember?" That's right, they have to swallow 1,000 needles, don't they? I was so dumbstruck that I remained silent. I was half expecting it to be a big joke, but I could see by the look in my teacher's eyes that it was far from funny to her. It was unthinkable yet happening. I couldn't say a word. She approached me and opened the case of pins and said, "You broke a promise. Get ready to swallow him." I couldn't. Look, everyone, he can't even commit to accepting his punishment, and the poor boy can't do it. When you think about it, 1,000 is too many, isn't it? Okay, that's okay. Don't worry, I'll change the rules just this one time. Not 1,000, but 100. Off you go. She hadn't forgiven me. She approached me with a pin in her hand. She held my nose and made me open my mouth. I thought I could escape her punishment if I pretended to swallow it. But it didn't work. I held the thumbtack between my back teeth and made a swallowing gesture. She looked at me and then slapped me in the face. The force of her slap caused me to spit out the thumbtack, and it tumbled down onto my desk. The classroom was so silent it was as if you could hear a pin drop. She snatched up the pin and jabbed it at my nose. "Even one? You can't even manage one?" The other option is death. Everyone knows this. I'm trying to teach you the importance of not telling lies. She got so angry she dropped the thumbtacks all over the floor. I was made to find the thumbtack I had in my mouth. I remember crying, and the sound of my sobbing being the only sound in that classroom. The fun I assumed we would have that day, creating animals out of milk cartons, was destroyed. Everyone was looking at me with cold eyes like I had caused all of this. And I was young enough to believe that it was my fault. The kindergarten teacher couldn't determine which thumbtack I had in my mouth, so she threw them all away. That was what saved me that day, I guess. I'm so glad I spat it out. I don't know if anyone else told on her. I never spoke about this until now. This happened many years ago. That laws and changes in school have been abundant since I was a kid, but the memories still stir up trauma in me. Music. Story 11. This happened over a decade ago and is about the only really creepy encounter I've had in my life. I'm a single mother and live in a fairly large city in the Midwest. It was just me and my toddler. It was winter when this happened. There was a pretty fierce snowstorm blowing outside. I'm a smoker, so I still have to go outside and deal with the wind, felting my face with snow as I feed my final craving of the night before heading to bed. My porch is covered and has trees in front of it, so it was really hard to see. In the night, I never turned my porch light on when I go out to smoke. It was late, about 11 or 12 at night. The street was deserted. Although I live in a big city, my neighborhood is really quiet. At night, my street dead ends to a park, so there isn't much traffic. As soon as I stepped outside, I could hear something in the distance. I spark of my cigarette anyway and looked down the street to where the noise was coming from. It sounded sort of like an animal growling as the noise got closer, but was still. About a block away, I could see a man walking. He was all in black or dark, and I couldn't make out anything beyond this. He was speaking in a deep guttural growl, and was the most demonic thing I've ever heard. It honestly did not sound human. But I know crazy can make people inhuman. It's hard for me to describe just how fear-invoking this voice was. I also have a curious nature, so I stood out in the store like a deer in headlights, watching and listening. I can't really remember most of what he said, but I do remember the phrase, "This is the Book of the Dead." He was walking on the opposite side of the road is my house, and it made it about a half a block away. I hadn't moved from directly in front of my door, holding my cell phone with a death grip in my pocket, and I'm also smoking a cigarette as quickly as possible to get back inside. He was approaching the intersection right before my dead-end street. I figured he would turn. I hoped he would turn. He didn't. He kept walking toward the dead end, still speaking in this deranged voice, incoherently. Something about this Book of the Dead. At this point, there are a million things racing through my mind. Can't see me. He's just some random crazy. Even though he was just about right across from my house, I still couldn't make out any details of his face or really see anything beyond the black. Heard. Suddenly he stops talking, stops walking, and his hood slowly turns in my direction, and I drop my cigarette, rush into my house, and lock the door, looking out of the window to see what he does. He just stood there for probably 30 seconds and then started walking again. He crossed the street and stopped again. Directly in front of the sidewalk from my door to the street, he stood facing my house for 3 to 4 minutes, and I stood behind my locked door staring at him as he stepped back at me. Although he was only about 20 feet from me, his hood still concealed his face. I was debating internally if I should call the cops. My phone still clutched in my hand, but he honestly wasn't breaking the law in any way. He was just standing on the sidewalk looking at my house. The standoff felt like it lasted an hour. With my heart leaping out of my chest, he was silent as he stood, and the only thing I could hear was the wind and pallets of snow tapping on my windows. He turned and started walking again, speaking again in his growl. He kept on walking down the dead end and then into the park. I could faintly hear his demonic voice through the door as he walked, and that was it. He was gone. I checked on my son, and he was sleeping soundly, although I can't say I did the same that night. Story 12, read by Unit 522. Whenever I sleep outside of my bedroom, like at a hotel or something, I hear this strange sound. It sounds like someone sawing or exhaling. It's somewhere in the room, but I can never find out where it's coming from. It sounds like there's someone else sleeping in the room with me. Even with all the lights on, I still can't find the source of the sound. It's very strange. I've tried taking photos and videos with my phone, but when I play them back, I get nothing. I turn all the lights off and I squint as I wait for my eyes to become adjusted. And sometimes I feel like there's something in the darkness. I can't be sure though, it's like I can sense there is something in the room with me. Some shape in the dark. I get worried whenever I hear that sound. And it's become impossible to ignore. I first noticed it last September and once I heard it there was no way to unhear it. I travel a lot for work and my company has this wonderful ability to put me in the cheapest, most out-of-the-way hotels that money can buy. I guess maybe sleeping in all these run-down places might have created some kind of apprehension, and maybe I'm just imagining things. Well, that's what I thought up until very recently. I heard the same sound at my house, the one place I had never heard it before. It happened when I came home late from work. I remember that I had brought pasta home with me that night and was eating it in my kitchen while my family was asleep. My eyes were very dry, so I reached for the eye drops to put one in each eye. I then heard that strange sighing sound. I wanted to open my eyes, but since I had just put the drops in them, I couldn't open them right away, so I slowly opened my right eye. Only a little bit, and I looked around the kitchen, but of course, there was nothing there. This was new. Like I said, I had only ever heard the sound when I was away from my house, but that night I heard it inside my own home. I was annoyed now, and I wanted some answers. I wasn't in a hotel, I was at my own house, so I could investigate as much as I felt like it, so that's what I did. I looked around the kitchen. But the sound wasn't coming from there. Maybe it was coming from down the hall. No, maybe it's coming from the back door. Nothing there. I was really straining my ears while I was searching. I felt like the sound was definitely coming from inside the kitchen, so I left the room and walked back in to reset or get fresh ears. Is that even a phrase? I don't know. As soon as I re-entered the kitchen, I heard it. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere close to the refrigerator. The thought that it could be some kind of mechanical noise, and I've had one too many late nights, did cross my mind, until I heard the exhaling sound mixed in with a dull hum of the refrigerator. It's here. I know it's around here somewhere, I thought as I bent over searching. The sound was louder for the first time. It felt like I was getting closer. And with that in mind, I decided to hit the lights to see if it made a difference. Usually I do need some time to allow my eyes to adjust, and that's when I feel like I can almost see something. But this night was a little different. From my left, I could see very clearly in the dark. I guess it was because I kept my left eye shut when I was initially searching around the kitchen. This was getting interesting. After several moments, I see two white dots emerge out of the darkness. I quickly realized that these dots were the whites of someone's eyes. I could see that the irises of these eyes were dark, perhaps black, and they were looking directly at me. I gasped in shock. I had never seen anything like that before. I kept looking, and I couldn't stop. To my surprise, I then saw a figure of someone, the owner of these eyes. It looked as if they were tied up. Their limbs were clearly bound. Their mouth wasn't visible. At that moment, I realized that the sound that I had been hearing was someone breathing through their nose. I could sense that there was no panic in this person. There was just an aura of hopeless acceptance. They were not fighting against their situation. The atmosphere and the darkness of my kitchen was that of pure desolation and surrender. The steady, patient breathing continued. I watched, and stunned horror, I could not move. After a few moments, the figure of the bound person appeared to become blurry and then faded into the darkness. To this day, I still have no idea who this person was. Or perhaps I should say apparition. I haven't heard that breathing again in my house. I really wish I knew more about this poor soul, and I wonder if I will ever hear it again. Next week, I will be going on another business trip, and I will do the same things that I did last time in an attempt to see the bound person again. I will use my eye drops and become accustomed to the dark. Perhaps I will see them again. I'm not sure. I am both excited and terrified. The user who shared the story never made another comment on this post. Music. Story 13. This story goes back to the year 2015. It was around 8 p.m. and it was summer, so at that time it was just getting dark. I live in a town where a crime almost never happens. It's a very safe rural area with few people. Here all the shops close early, so that night I went shopping around 7:40 and everything was quiet. I didn't have enough money to pay, so I bought some stuff, and when I got home I had to go out again to take the rest of the money I needed to pay to the store. I was listening to music I had bought. new headphones, and was trying them out. I was walking 2 blocks from my house when a motorcycle with 2 men came out. Of nowhere the man on the back got off and took out a gun, pointed it at my head, and started yelling at me to give him my cell phone. He yelled, "Give me everything, give me everything." And I just squeezed my cell phone in headphones and yelled, "No, no, these are my things," over and over again. The whole time the gun was pointed at my face less than a meter away. When the guy with the gun saw I wouldn't give him anything, he fired. I saw very clearly how he pulled the trigger on the gun. He got on the motorcycle with the other man and they left at full speed. I didn't get shot at. I don't know if it was a real gun or fake, if it had bullets in it or not. I don't know anything. Plus it was just after dark, but it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. As soon as they left, I ran out and got to the store where I was going first. I arrived crying and shaking, and it was hard for me to speak. I asked for help, and they called my mom, who came to pick me up in a taxi because I didn't want to walk home, even though it was 4 straits away. That was the first and last time I experienced a robbery attempt. It was the most damn stressful situation I've ever been through. I don't know how to describe the absolute panic I felt when I saw the barrel of a gun in front of my eyes. And all for a cheap cell phone and some headphones. God. They didn't give a about a girl's life. They put a gun to my face. I wish that no one has to go through this, much less children. I was lucky, but many are not, especially in the city to which my town belongs, where this is a common occurrence. Story 14, read by Papa Scare. I've had a few scary encounters in my life. I'm not sure if that means that I'm old or just a creep magnet, but this one still creeps me out. In the early 80s, when I was 8, my family was visiting my uncle who lived in backwoods, Missouri. He lived on a lot of land, and the only other people who really even lived on the street were relatives, so no one else ever just happened to be out there. This meant no one ever locked their doors because random family members were always coming by for this or that. One night while we were there, my parents and aunt and uncle decided to go to a nearby town to go bowling because bowling. My brothers, who were 11 and 12, my female cousins 6 and 14, and I am female, stayed home. It was still daylight when the adults left, but it started raining pretty hard and got dark quickly. We used to play this game that was essentially hide and seek in the dark house, but we cleverly called it vampire. There was a thin little mattress on the living room floor that some of the kids would sleep on at night, so the person who was it would lie on the mattress and fold it over themselves like a coffin and count down to midnight. When they got to midnight, they went looking for you again. All of the lights are off, and you tried to make it back to the coffin before you got caught because the house was in the country. It was pitch black at night. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. What this meant for the game was that 1, you couldn't tell where the vampire was looking, so you just had to make a break for it. And 2, if you're extremely lazy, and I'm sure by now you can guess which of us met those standards, you could hide in a living room with a coffin and get the base quickly. Ben, my 11-year-old brother, was it, and was doing the normal countdown. I was hiding maybe 6 feet from him. As he was counting, there was a flash of lightning. I don't know if I was already looking at the living room window or if the lightning made me look. But with the backlight of the lightning, I saw a man with his face against the window. He had his hands on each side of his face as if he was trying to peer in. And he looked exactly like the stereotypical creepster, heavy set, scraggly beard, etc. Feel every hair on my body standing on end. Immediately, I began to convince myself that I didn't see what I saw, but then Ben stilly whispered, "If anyone is hiding in here, stay still." I sort of croaked out, "And I'm here," right as there was another flash of lightning. The creepster was still there, but was no longer trying to look in the window. Instead, he was now looking toward the front door. Ben and I immediately knew what was coming next. From where he was standing, creepster was probably only 5 feet from the front door. Ben was the same distance, but there was a couch between him and the door. Ben leapt over the couch and locked the door right as a man started trying the handle. At this point, I guess Ben decided that it was best to let the man know that people were home and that we knew he was there, because he flipped on the porch light and then started turning on the lights in the house. This is going to sound weird, but I was too terrified to panic. Having said that, I was relying completely on Ben to know and tell me what to do. He told me to go lock the other doors and was yelling for everyone else come out and lock all of the windows. As I was locking the side door, we saw the guy moving around to the back of the house. So Ben told me to hurry and lock the sliding glass door. Those doors are right around the corner from each other, so I was closest. As soon as I flipped the lock on the back door, the guy was standing there just looking in at me. I just stood there for a couple of beats frozen looking at him. I clearly recall hearing Ben in a very calm but firm voice say, "Close the curtain, listen to me, okay? Close the curtain." So I did. We tried to call the police, but my aunt and uncle had a stupid party line and it wouldn't work, whether from the storm or from a neighbor leaving it off the hook or whatever. For the record, they're the only people I've ever known with a party line, so this wasn't normal to me either. But for those of you who don't know what that is, in really rural areas, multiple people on the street would actually share a phone line. It would have different rings for different households, but you could pick up the phone and listen to your neighbor's conversation. We also tried to summon help on my uncle CB radio, but couldn't reach anyone. My uncle was a hunter, so he had a gun rack full of rifles in his room, but my older cousin was on an out-of-town hunting trip and took them with him. All we could find was a BB gun that looked like a real rifle. I vividly remember Ben putting me on phone duty and Scott, my older brother, on CB duty while he stood watch at the little square window on the front door with the BB gun. Maybe 30 minutes later, Ben said he's back, he's coming up the driveway. The rest of us froze in fear, but Ben opened the door and stepped out on the porch, pointed the gun, and said, "Get out of here right now." Then we hear our cousin Kyle, who lived down the road a bit, say, "You know that's a BB gun, right?" Even though Kyle was only 15, I remember that we felt like we had been saved when he showed up. Kyle seemed really skeptical of our story, like we were playing a trick on him, even though we had no idea he was coming, but he stayed with us until our parents came home. We saw the man in the front yard once more. There was a long gravel driveway. Off to one side of the driveway, quite away from the house, was a spot where my cousins parked cars they were working on. I know, so stereotypical. While we were on watch, we saw the guy messing with one of the cars. It was actually Kyle's. When he couldn't get it started, he walked into the woods and ran beside the house. We didn't see him again after that. Honestly, I don't remember if we even told our parents what happened. When they got home, there was definitely no police involvement, though. We just went on with our trip, but we never played vampire again without some mention of that night. Story 15. I honestly forgot about this evening. It wasn't until my cousin brought it up to me one night when we were actually talking about Reddit and the creepy and crazy things that I'd experienced growing up. I'm 25, and this must have happened when I was 10 or 12. My cousin came to visit me during the summer. I live in a small town, and at the time there probably wasn't even 2,000 people living here. I may not know everyone, but I do know quite a few people in my subdivision. Enough to know that most of them are elderly or parents with kids, so this made what happened so strange. I was just looking for my cat. She's allowed to go out, which has never been a problem, other than one time when she ran away for a whole week. And ever since then she's had a curfew, 9 p.m. just before dusk. In my backyard there's a football field, and in the bush just more of a reason to have her inside at night. It was getting late, and she still hadn't come in, of course, at the time, me not really paying attention because I was visiting with my casa. Before I knew it, it was passing midnight, and we were heading to bed. I noticed I hadn't seen my cat and started to freak out. I had looked everywhere in the house and had shaken her trades, and nothing. I decided to try looking around the house outside, and still I couldn't find her. I went inside to tell my cousin I was going to walk up the street and see that maybe she was in someone's yard. I live on one of the end streets of the subdivision, so there's a curve at the beginning of my street, and as I made my way up the street, I was calling my cat's name out and checking the yards as I went along. It was past midnight now, so I didn't expect anyone to be out, but then there was this man. He was just standing at the end of the street, the second street after mine. He was just standing there, back facing me on the other side of where the street light is. I couldn't really see much of him. I didn't think too much of it because I was preoccupied looking for my cat, but then I noticed he turned around and faced right. I mean, he completely turned his body to the right and then straight ahead and then to the left. As I was seeing this, I was kind of confused, thinking, what is this man doing? Is he looking for something? And then he turned and faced my direction, and he started walking, which again didn't startle me until I realized that he noticed me and started running. This full-grown man started fallout running toward me. I was so scared I ran as fast as I could, and I could hear his footsteps getting louder and closer. I was only 4 houses away from my house, so it didn't take me long to get there. As soon as I got in, I slammed my door and locked it, and just as I did, staring out the door, window heart racing, I didn't see anyone out there. Relieved I didn't, but sort of curious and confused, wondering where this man could have gone, I went to the living room to look out the big window that oversees the whole street, and nothing. No one to boot. My cat was inside when I came in. I have no idea how or where this man came from or went, but I was just looking for my cat. It was terrifying. Story 16, read by Danny Dreadful. This happened to me and the man I was dating back in the late spring of 2000. I am an avid and experienced urban explorer. I have visited many different abandoned sites. The place I'm writing about has been explored several times by others since, but when I visited, it wasn't a commonly known location, and all the buildings were still intact, except for the main house, which had, from what I had heard, burned, leaving nothing but the outer stone wall. Nothing but the outer wall remains, and all of the other buildings have been torn down since I was there. To more recent urban explorers, it is known as the Stone Castle, and even more recently the Oster Castle, the name given by the Heritage Society that has decided to fix it up. When my boyfriend at the time discovered it, he saw it in the distance from a roof he was working on in Oro Madanti, Ontario. There was once, but not anymore, a large barn, a carriage house, and towards the back of the property is stable. The first weekend we both had off together, we made the hour drive to explore it. The property was absolutely stunning. On the top of a hill back from the road, you can almost imagine living surrounded by such beauty, and we did exactly that. The house itself was gone except for the wall, and if you looked in the basement window you can see an old stove laying amongst the wreckage. You could tell it had been a beautiful home at one time to whomever owned it. Being the explorer I insisted that we investigate every single corner of every single building that was on the property, and although my ex was less than enthusiastic about it, I insisted. I honestly did not see the point of driving for an hour just to look at the outside of the buildings. No, I had to go in the buildings. The first building we explored was the barn. Both upstairs and down in the basement of the barn is where things went from wow to holy really fast. The basement had been used as a place for satanic sacrifices. There was satanic artwork all over, a knife with what appeared to be blood on it, and an altar with black handles, a bottle of what smelled like blood. The most disturbing thing was that whenever satanic group was using it, they had built a makeshift cage out of the silo with chains inside and everything. My boyfriend at the time wanted to get the heck out of there as fast as possible, but I convinced him to stay so we could explore the rest of the buildings on the property. I told him it was probably just a bunch of kids just screwing around, no big deal, right? Wrong. Our next stop was the stables at the back of the property, and honestly I was so caught up in my love for exploring that he would not have been able to persuade me to leave without going in every single building, no matter what. I opened the door into the stables, and the smell hit me. Rotting flesh. The entire room was littered with animal corpses, dogs, cats, rabbits, even coyotes and foxes. They had been horribly mutilated. It was absolutely the worst thing I have ever laid my eyes upon. As soon as my boyfriend saw that, he grabbed me and said that we were leaving right at that moment, and that killing animals is not stupid kids doing stupid things. This is some serious undersoner. So we started to leave, but there was one more building I wanted to check on the way out, a carriage house. He said no effing way were we going in there, and stomped off up the hill back to the main house, assuming I would follow. I didn't follow. I went around the home by myself and took a quick peek in the carriage house. It was anticlimactic. It had absolutely nothing in it. It's actually a good thing that I snuck off like I did, because if I hadn't we wouldn't have seen them coming. They would have been able to sneak up on us as we were coming up the hill and do God knows what to us. The first one I noticed was an adult male with a baseball bat. He had actually opened our car door and was rifling through our things in our car, trying to find the key. I'm guessing there were about 8 people in total in the group, ranging from adults, I would say in their 30s, to teenagers, and children no more than 12 or 13. They all had weapons: golf clubs, sticks, a cane, and baseball bats. I yelled at the guy what the hell he thought he was doing going through our car, and my boyfriend came charging over the hill. Bless his heart, right through the posse of creeps and weirdos who seemed to be lying in wait for us. It appeared that we had ruined whatever plans they had in mind, because they Immediately backed off, some even trying to hide their weapons behind their backs, which was just stupid if you ask me. Who wouldn't notice a baseball bat behind somebody's back? Baseball bat guides Amanda to know what we were doing there, and I demanded to know what the hell he thought he was doing in our car. He didn't answer, he just looked at me, all nervous. My ex-boyfriend said we were just admiring the architecture of the house, and that we were just leaving, and they let us get into our car and drive off. Which in itself was a miracle, I'd say, in light of what we had discovered on the property. They followed us in a black pickup with no place for a good 20 minutes. Instead of heading for home, we went to the closest city, which was Barrie, Ontario. Filed a report with a policeman who seemed more shaken than us, and headed home. My ex never went back to that roofing job again, he had someone else finish it. And he went to another one. I wanted to go back, but after telling people what happened, I couldn't find anyone to go with me. My ex and I continued various explorations, but we both started carrying knives. I still carry one to this day. Even when I hike, I have not read of anyone else having similar experiences at Satan's Castle. Recently, my cousin, who is also an explorer, contacted me with a place she wanted to explore. Guess where, and guess what? We have made arrangements to go there in the next couple of weeks. So on that note, and many years later, Satan's Castle cult, let's hope we don't meet again. And to any other urban explorers out there, please be careful, you never know what you might come across in these abandoned places. Music, Foreign.